Today in TRS 2019 I'll be looking at what prototype track characteristics I need to take into account, and I'll discuss some of the changes needed to lay track in TRS 2019, as well as the new PBR procedural track now available, and how that has changed many of the old rules when laying new style track, as well as some methods to make laying track easier and more reliable. So let's get into it. Let's cover some basic rules dictated by the prototype, starting with the premise that not all track is the same. First, wood sleepers, or ties as they're known in North America, versus concrete sleepers used in Europe for many decades versus steel sleepers, used where termites can cause very nasty damage on wooden sleepers, or timber suitable for sleepers does not exist. It is still acknowledged the disadvantages of concrete over timber are still many-fold over the advantages, but new pre-stressed concrete sleepers are slowly taking over on many mainline tracks. Ballast, well, the nature of ballast varies widely. Some high-grade tracks make sure the ballast is kept very close to the track and does not extend much past the end of the sleeper or tie, whereas many have the ballast widespread well beyond the limit of the sleeper length. Concrete sleepers need much heavier and thicker ballast beds, and steel sleepers quickly damage and break down ballast much quicker than either of the other two types of sleepers. Plus, some yards and spurs don't even have ballast, or at best a token amount, which is quickly lost further in the mud at every rainfall. So, it's likely that almost anything goes when laying track, but it is suggested that when doing so, be consistent, as most railroads have their own standards strictly adhered to. At the end of this tutorial, I have a bonus video clip of a little 2662 Mallet on the Eagle River route. The engine is freeware, the route comes from jointed rail, and the complete clip is recorded in TRS 2019. I think it will be well worth having a look. Here is a TRS 2019 procedural track called TRS19 Track 1 Procedural. You can safely put PBR ballast texture onto this track. Here I am laying a straight segment and adding the same PBR texture that is used in the track between the sleepers. You can see the two integrate perfectly, even after I use the smooth spline tool. But when I lay TRS 2019 procedural track, which has PBR technology infused into the track, and apply a non-PBR texture ballast, it shows mixing old ballast textures with the new track does not always go well. As in this example, up closest to the camera, it has a nasty edge artifact. Which continues further along the track from certain angles. Not something you want in your layout. Even using the spline smooth tool does not help. In fact, it is worse. Also note similar PBR ballast is not like the older TANE track much either. I should mention that some of these topics will be very basic, mainly intended for those who have little or no experience with procedural track. So let's continue with the exercise of laying some procedural track over a bumpy, and I mean intentionally bumpy, surface. What I'll do first is select some procedural track. In this case it's called TRS2019 Track 1 Procedural Seasonal. The name is shown here on the screen. For those that don't know what seasonal means, if you use the environmental controls, you can designate the month that your route will operate in. That changes the season from, say, spring to summer or winter. And any object that is labelled seasonal, be it track in this case, or maybe foliage, trees or the like, those seasonal objects will reflect the seasonal change from a bright summer to a winter snowy and cold winter. Then I'll lay it over an artificially bumpy spot that I've created just to demonstrate an extreme example. So having selected the track, which I'll use the plus sign and setting the mouse position where I want it to start, I'll then move the mouse to the point I want to finish laying the track. I did warn you this was a very basic set at this time. However, if you look closely, we have a complete disaster of a track. So I'll move over to the Tools panel and select the Smooth Spline tool. And it takes just one click to set the track straight, level and all distortion is gone. So now let's use a matching ballast texture from the PBR range. In this case, PBR Gravel 2 Seasonal. I'll be matching the track ballast already used and with the radius set to minimum size. I can now apply all along the track we just laid. I must say that while I see this method of ballast laying done all the time in Trainz, and even more so in another sim, I personally feel it's unrealistic. Bear in mind the prototype images shown earlier. So that concludes the quick lesson on laying track on a bumpy surface. Our next lesson involves trying to get a consistent and fixed percentage grade for our track when we need it. So let's get started by laying a section of track, but only after using the Get Gradient tool to set our grade to 0.75, which means 0.75%. Then we simply lay the track. You may notice as I lay more segments, there is an ever-increasing shadow under the track, confirming the track is indeed climbing. And we can get as many extensions as we want. And then using the Get Gradient tool, we can confirm every section has the same grade setting. As shown here, checking each segment between the spline points, which is the circular dotted line spline point beneath each track. Then once again, using the Smooth Spline tool, we can automatically ground fill to match the grade. And once again, if you wish, you can now apply the ballast. And since we applied the Smooth Spline tool, there will be no distortions as shown in the previous example. And there you have a smooth, consistent 0.75% uphill grade. This lesson will show you how to lay out a traditional yard ladder with a simple method to get consistent spacing between tracks which works on both straight and curved track yards. I'll start by laying a one segment straight track with a length matching the longest track in the yard, plus enough length for a point or switch at each end. Then I'll just lay the number of tracks I want, in this case the main plus 3 additional, all to the same length as the first. But I'll not worry too much about the spacing right now, and while I'm laying each length, I will need to hold the shift button on my keyboard to stop the tracks trying to join together. Here I purposely laid one of the tracks a little bit too short, just to show it is not that critical either and can be fixed during the track alignment step. To align the track, I'll select the Move Track arrow, the hotkey M, and in this case, starting at one end of the yard, I'll align the first spline point to just touch the next spline point. Don't forget to hold that shift key or you'll have to clean up the mess afterwards. You will need to use the arrow keys to change your view. You should get as vertical as possible to look down on the area working. This will help get an accurate alignment and avoid any parallax problems. Assuming the track on the left is the longest track after I've built the ladder, I'll have all the other tracks, all three of them, closer together by moving the spline point so it's just touching the edge of the ballast of the track next to it. Then move to the other end and do exactly the same thing. Now I need to ensure all tracks are at the same height or my point/switch will not work. So select the Apply Vertex button and touch each white spline point so that it turns yellow. And once they're all yellow, all tracks will be at the same height. You will notice you only need to sit the spline point at one end of each segment of track, because the other end will automatically align to the same height. Now I can put a separate straight track at an angle that's not too steep, say around 10%, from just before the leftmost track as shown here, and crossing over all tracks as well as slightly beyond. It is important to start before the first track and end after the last track. Once again, use the Vertex height tool to get it to the same height as all the other tracks. If you look closely where the track intersects with one of the ladder tracks, you will notice that once the tracks are all at the same level, where the rails cross each other, they are perfectly aligned height-wise. Now we select the track to lay some more, and I am setting this into slow motion so you can watch what I'm doing, and actually joining the first yard track to the ladder track as shown here. You'll notice I now get the familiar red and green arrow and a switch leader. That more or less confirms the point is okay. However, you will note the track running across the yard is not quite straight anymore, so you need to select the Straighten Track tool, that's the hotkey letter B, and select that track to straighten it up. Keeping all the track straight is very important, as you'll see when we continue. Because they will often lose their straight characteristics when you add something to it. When you're laying a ladder, you always need to keep an eye out for a track that is no longer straight. Now, once again, go to the track ladder and join it to the second yard track. Note again, the ladder track loses its straightness, so straighten it once more. I can start removing some of the redundant bits of track and continue to build my ladder. I use the Delete Track button, which is the X, hotkey is D. This time you'll notice one of the yard tracks has lost its straightness, so straighten it up. Now continue with the next track, joining the ladder track to the third track in the yard, and remove the redundant bit of track also. And now I also need to straighten the third yard track. Okay, let's add the switch for the fourth and final track in the yard ladder. And once again, you need to straighten the track, and remove the rest of the redundant track bits, ensuring all tracks remain straight. You might notice at this point I've left the fourth track running the full length, which is like another siding which can be used for anything else you wish, such as a switch arrest track, a damaged car track, any number of such uses come to mind. We have a couple of red or green arrows which have been left behind after the redundant track has been deleted. These need to be cleared. To do this, I'll go to the trackside mode, that's hotkey Y, and select the Delete Object key, which is similar to the Delete Track key, but note this cannot delete track. It is purely for trackside objects like switch leaders. Move along the track and with any arrow point you see they are both red, or are not aligned to a switch point. They are probably redundant and can be removed using the Delete Track Object button. So now I move to the other end. Do a final check to ensure all your yard tracks are straight, and repeat the whole process to add your second ladder. Once you've done that, hey presto, you'll have a complete yard. And provided you watched for those tracks that distorted when a track link was added, and removed all those unused lever points, it should be relatively trouble-free. At the other end of this yard, I'll quickly put in a crossover from one track to another, just so you know how to do it. Using the Add Track button, that's hotkey A, position where you want the crossover to start and move it to where you want the crossover to finish on the adjacent track, making sure there's a long enough spacing between points to ensure you get a smooth turnout. If it's too short, you'll notice a kink at the blade of each turnout. If so, undo it and start again. You will notice you get the traditional green and red switch lever on each of the crossover points or switches. Wherever I create a crossover on a point switch, I always inspect it to ensure the frogs are formed, the blade is complete, the lever is present and there are no kinks. This saves you a lot of work later trying to rectify a shoddy crossover installation. And that wraps up the job of. Now I will be showing you how to lay a double track curve spacing example to get perfect spacing on a variable curve track. So we start off by laying our first curve, ultimately forming a 90-degree arc. Then we lay one short segment and make it straight. This helps to round out the final segment of the curve at each end. Accordingly, we do need to do the same at the other end of the arc. To lay the second track, we don't worry too much about how close we get to the track. We just want to make sure we get around with the same number of segments making up the arc. Don't forget to hold the shift key to stop the two tracks together. If you do have that happen, just use the undo command on the top bar. Once that's done, we need to make sure that final short segment of each end is straight. Ouch, I forgot my own advice and didn't hold the shift key. How embarrassing. Undo and start again. As you spent time on the first arc getting it to be reasonably smooth, it makes sense to align the new arc back to the original. Choose your spline's placing and move the track and each spline point to the same alignment for each point. It is important in moving a spline to position yourself behind it and as vertical as possible. This ensures your moving of the spline will not be subjected to varying view angles, something I had some problems with until I thought about why it was happening. And there you have a perfect pair of tracks for a double mainline. In this example, I'm going to run a line across a lake, or it could even be a wide river, with a suitable bridge supporting a track over the water. You'll notice the way I use a pick list to find and identify the track I want to use. I have covered pick lists in a separate video in general, but I will be doing a video covering pick lists in full detail, as they are an invaluable way of increasing your efficiency in finding often used objects. So now that we have our track selected, let's lay it across the water and you'll see the track has gone underwater. Not sure the Trainz would like that. So normally I would fix that by using the smooth spline point as in the previous example. But thinking ahead, we need to remove the track between two shorelines anyway, as that will be deleted and replaced by a selected bridge. So make two new spline points using the insert spline button and set them a little bit back from the actual shoreline. And you'll see the reason for that in a moment. Now we use the delete track button to remove that bit of track between the two segments on the shorelines. I can now use a smooth spline button to level the ground underneath both tracks on the opposing shorelines if it isn't already so. Now, assuming you've selected the bridge you want, you can use the one that I'm installing if you have it in your content folder. The name of this bridge model is up on the screen. Install it from the edge of one shoreline to the other. Try and keep the spline points as close as you can to alignment with the track on both sides. Now we use the Get Vertex button to find the height of the spline on the short section of track nearest the shoreline edge, and we apply the shown height using the Apply Vertex button to the bridge spline point nearest that track. We need to do both sides of the bridge, particularly if the track on opposing shorelines is at a different height from one side to the other. Now that the bridge is the same height as the track, we can fine-tune the position of it to be as close to straight with the track spline point as possible. If in moving the bridge spline point you change the height slightly, you can always set the track spline point nearest to the same height as the start of the bridge. Then, using the track move key, attach the track to the bridge. Don't try attaching the bridge to the track. It's far safer and less fraught with problems to move the track to the bridge. It should automatically connect. Now we have a track running straight through the bridge, but we still have one issue to overcome. The bridge hasn't actually fallen down, but if this is a real situation, we would need to install bridge supports and abutments at each end. So follow the example in the video and add a support in the middle of the bridge where if it wasn't there the whole thing would collapse. As always, a little bit of fiddling, moving the pier to be right in the middle and right underneath the support point and set to the right height. Practice until you get it right. In this example, the stone pier I've chosen is not exactly wide enough to hold the two steel support points underneath the bridge. So I'll add a second similar one merged to the first so that it looks like one pier. Just a hint here, if you can't get the height correct, use the shift key in conjunction with the height tool and that will give you a much finer adjustment. As you'll see in this example, looking under the water, I probably didn't pick the best pier example model as it is too short. For the purposes of this exercise, I'll just raise the riverbed so that it's touching the bottom of the pier. You'd normally not notice it anyway, but it just shows you how you get around such a problem like that. Now we need a support abutment on each end. Somebody's just told me I'm not pronouncing abutment correctly. It should be abutment. Well, I think it's just another example of some regional issues on language, such as Z or Z, which is correct. Anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, follow the example in the video and remember to do both ends. We now have a bridge fully installed across a river, ready for the first train. That's all I intended to cover today. However, just to keep you informed, I have two new videos just about ready to post. Firstly, a more detailed look at the now official early access TRS2019 train simulator just released, which is expected to have been upgraded substantially compared to the current beta version I'm using. Second, using the same test track as I have just exposed, I'll be doing a new video showing how to create a scene of a track making its way across a hilly location. This will include coverage of all the tools used, the problems it can cause, how to make it look realistic rather than something like a moon crater, and the easiest and or best way to form mountains and valleys. So, if you'd like to get a notice when these new videos are uploaded to YouTube, and you're not already subscribed, please use the subscribe button below this video and hit that bell on the right side, which will almost guarantee you get the notice as soon as each video is uploaded. I might also mention that I do read each and every comment, which is not only the best way to let me know your thoughts, but if you viewed the comments of previous videos, you will note I've not only replied to many of these comments, but there are examples where I've answered a query from a viewer that has helped. So use that feature to your advantage, and please hit the like button if you found this video interesting. Well, I guess it's time to finish up. Please do your best to enjoy life and be kind to others. Hooroo from me. you.